All right, we're on. Welcome back to a special edition of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me, as always, is Fitz. Fitz, how are you? And how you doing?
Well, it's been a hectic week for both of us, and we're just m- people working out of our homes doing some media stuff. Of course, the Guthrie family is going through a whole lot, and I'm sure upwards of 100 different investigators in Tucson, Arizona, and that's what we're going to talk about today. This is a special episode of Cold Ray, your Ray, Cold Red, and just the two of us discussing this. And we're going to try to piece together everything we talked about during the week, a little bit how it works with the media. It's for us, it's 4 o'clock, Saturday afternoon, East Coast time. Um, Developments can happen in the next 24, 48 hours, but this is what we're going to talk about what we know up to this point in time. Ray, why don't you walk us through a little bit? I think everyone out there knows what's been happening, but give us some of the highlights of what's been happening for, I guess we're in officially day 7 of this
Day seven, yeah.
abduction.
It's really a sad situation. I mean, I have an elderly mom, and I know there's a lot of people out there that also have elderly parents, and I can't fathom uh, what it would be like to go through something like that. Have your mother come up missing, and the latest that we've heard lately is that President Trump made comments that there's very strong clues, and he says there's definite answers coming soon. But let's go back a little bit and take a look, and we'll talk about some things as I go through. And I'm going to kind of hit on this timeline a little bit, Jim, because I'm always concerned about when you put a timeline out, there's still gaps. You know what I mean? Um, but the strongest point in the timeline for me was from 9:48 to 9:50, and that's
Saturday
when
night,
she's
right?
right Saturday night. That's when she's dropped off by a family member, and evidence corroborates those statements, and that becomes our baseline assumption here. We know at 9:50 because the garage door goes down that she's safely inside her home. That's the starting point for everything. And then investigators give us a window between 1:47 a.m. and 2:28 a.m. And I'm thinking, when I first look at that, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay. And this is what happens. Um, this is what happens now. The doorbell camera is removed at 1:47 a.m. Then there's motion detected at 2:12 a.m.
No video, just like a
Just motion
script message, that motion of some sort, which could
because
have been an animal out that way. Just,
it was some sort of motion.
yes.
So, I mean, I have cameras. I get motion detected all the time. I look on it.
Yep.
It's an animal, a deer, something of that nature. The pacemaker is disconnected at 2:28. So
Right.
that tells us that she's separated from her Apple Watch that monitors that, and they're no longer able to collect data. Here's my question. I want to get your thoughts on this. At 41 minutes, usually when there's a kidnapping, especially when we're talking about ransom, you're in and you're out. You're not spending 40 minutes inside the home or even outside the home. Now, there could be some things, but I want to get your perspective because nobody's really talked about that. There's that big gap there, you know, 41 minutes. What's going on?
Well, Ray, a good question, and we've both been asked this on the air a few times this week on different shows, different networks, even. Um, and let me just start this by saying this is an abduction. I think with the blood on the ground, no one's denying this was a forcible abduction. At least the information we're getting out of the law enforcement officers in Tucson. The question is, for what purpose? Abduction for some sort of revenge? We'll just leave it simple at that right now. Or was it a abduction for profit, which is also known as, of course, as kidnapping? And we'll come back to that a little bit later. But I'll tell you what, be it an abduction for revenge or an abduction for kidnapping purposes, for money purposes, 41 minutes is a long time to spend in a place. Um, One of the clues that the John Benet Ramsey case was never a kidnapping. Of course, the girl was found, in the basement 6 hours after the police were called. She should have been found right away, but she wasn't. That it was like a botched kidnapping. But the people sat around the house, allegedly the foreign faction, and wrote this 3-page letter. They even did a copy of like 2 or 3 sentences, threw it away, then started over again, carefully handwritten, et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to get into that case, the details, but all along, why would a kidnapper spend this much time in the house? Your risk increases exponentially if you're there kidnapping for greed, for purpose, for money purposes. Why hang the house? She's 84. She's not putting up a fight. She's not barricaded with guns in a safe room or something like that. Certainly, as far as we know. So why 41 minutes? By all reports, Ray, it was not a burglary attempt or a robbery. Drawers aren't pulled out. Nothing is apparently missing, and from the house, except Mrs. Guthrie. Nancy Guthrie is her full name, of course, 84 years old. What is that 41 minutes? What does it mean? Did someone take the doorbells off and wait outside? I offered on one of my media hits, I think yesterday, that I've gone to prisons and interviewed serial offenders, serial killers, serial rapists, other bad guys as part of our profiling training. And sometimes you'd sit and you talked about victimology. Why did you choose this victim? Why not that victim? How did you get in? How did you get out? Ingress, egress, pre-offense behavior, post-offense behavior. And sometimes they would say they'd start the rape or something, if that's the case, and then a police car would go by. Ray, we spent all summer talking to the father of a victim of a Center City rapist.
Yeah.
He put a pillow. He probably would have gone out in there, got out of the rape scenario even sooner, but the police knocked on the door. He stayed longer. So my point is, there could be reasons we're not even thinking of why someone spent that 41 minutes in the door, or it could be of a personal nature. They wanted to have a conversation with her. The thing blew up. Bad things happened to Mrs. Guthrie, and that's when they had to leave. So that's just a few scratching the surface instrument. If you're a good kidnapper, and we can talk about the kidnapping aspect a little bit later, you don't spend that much time in there because your risk level goes. It's a high risk crime to begin with. You're making it risk on steroids to stay there 41 whole minutes. So is there some other reason? Were they scared off by something? Did a police car go by down the street? Like I said, all these examples. I don't know. Something will explain that at some point. We just don't know yet.
Well, I think you would agree with me. This does not look random.
No.
And the potential for her to have known her captors, or the captors to at least have known and done some pre-offense planning, that's also, I think, very important. One of the big red flags to me is the fact that they removed the doorbell camera, the Ring doorbell camera, because it gives them, they're aware of surveillance. They're intentionally trying to conceal. So they're at the home, they're going in the front door. But here's the thing about removing that doorbell camera. And if you're out there and you have these doorbell cameras, I have cameras too, on different types of things. Buy the service so it stores stuff in the cloud.
It's like $100 a year.
It's well worth it. It's well worth it. And I'm going to tell you, when I would think if they remove the camera, and even if they don't have it, had to take a picture of somebody. Didn't they get anything with that? One of the offenders, and when you look at the terrain, it's a very desolate place. I mean, desolate, poor. I mean, very secluded. And one of the things that shocked me, Jim, was that there's an ordinance that there's no floodlights allowed to be shown from 11 p.m. at night until sunbreak. I had never heard of anything like that before. So if I have a floodlight that's motion detected and someone walks by, I can't activate that. I have to have it off. It doesn't make any sense. But that's something else. But here is the thing about that camera is the offenders knew it was there. They knew how it worked, and they had time to remove it. That's not typical.
And Ray, I think most importantly here, as successful as they've been in the abduction so far, I keep putting things off. We'll discuss the success level of the kidnapping. Did they know in advance there was no subscription service to this. Because it would, if you walk up to the camera, you could smash it with a hammer, cut it off with a a reciprocating saw, whatever you want. That's going to be captured on the cloud if you have that subscription. I can't believe she didn't. It was technically a Nest camera. It wasn't Ring or Blink.
Okay.
Nest camera. Not that the brand really matters here, but so and that's what I've been saying to summarize this: abduction for revenge, kidnapping for money. Whoever did this, either they have themselves had access inside this house, knowledge of it, or they know someone who has inside access to the house and knowledge of it. And that's the list that the officers and the investigators have to go through now. And that could be up in the hundreds of people over the last 3 years or so who gardeners, medical people, lawn cutters, mechanics, HVAC people, Amazon, UPS, Uber, all these people, and somehow they found the security system people themselves. They somehow know there was no subscription service, which changes everything. Now they still could have worn a mask and covered completely up, and the car could have had its tag taken off and everything. But it's a big advantage nowadays to know no spotlights, as you mentioned, and floodlights, whatever, and to know that there's no cloud archives of people out front of the house or behind the house. I can't believe that the people didn't know that going in.
I agree with you. I agree. The other thing when you look, you talked about the gardeners, and I really think it's important. And I know law enforcement is doing this. I know the bureau is doing this. They're interviewing everybody that was in contact with her in the last 60 days. That's what I would do.
That's where they'll start. They're going to go back farther after that.
Exactly. They'll start there and then continue to go back further and further. It starts real broad, and they'll narrow it down. Like I talked last night when I was on one of the I was on Fox News last night. But one of the questions that I've had asked me this week is, why did they withhold which family member dropped her off? I think I kind of hooked on that, and I says, look, it's standard practice. It's really not suspicious by itself. I mean, they could be trying to verify timelines. It's still underway. They don't want to harass family members, So, but I still get to the fact that the individuals that did this were known, and I wonder, people talk, was it opportunistic? I don't think it was opportunistic.
Not the abduction part.
No.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, I don't think it was. But I would think, and they talked a lot about the crime scene and, what they were doing with the crime scene and how come they kept coming back to the crime scene. If I'm in charge of this and new information comes in and I say, well, there's some information that came in that we need to go back and verify that may be in the home. In other words, there's a second demand note that came in, a ransom note. And in that, there was some information because as soon as that came in, they were back at the house. So apparently there was some information that came in. When we talk about, let's talk a little bit about this ransom note. What do you think about this ransom note, Jim?
Well, I like to call them communications because it could come in any form. Supposedly it's an email. So we'll call it a ransom communication. No one outside the task force, maybe the family, and I'm calling it a task force because there's FBI, sheriffs, I think Border Patrol and other agencies, no doubt, state police involved in this. If it's not 100 strong right now, I'd be very surprised if the number wasn't near there. So we haven't seen this. I mean, Kaczynski the Unabomber sent his communications to the New York Times and a few victims. And of course, the devices themselves would go to individual victims. So the media has been used before. Why two local Tucson TV stations and then TMZ of all networks, if you will, of all shows? That's interesting. And that tells me on the surface, it makes sense, maybe a local news station, but TMZ, it tells me that the people probably watch TMZ, and whoever, and I'm not going to conflate yet the abductor with the writer of these communications. I'm not prepared to do that yet because they may be two different entities involved here, both having done what they did or what they're doing for distinctly separate purposes. So we don't know a whole lot about it, but I'll tell you, as a kidnapping ransom communication, it seems in the early days, even the authorities weren't that clear if they linked to the disappearance of Mrs. Guthrie. And if you're a kidnapper and you don't put something conclusive or something very much unimpeachable in your letter, including a Polaroid picture with a newspaper being held up, that's the old proof of life photos for years. It can be done differently nowadays. Certainly a lock of hair, certainly a piece of clothing that we'll say Mrs. Guthrie was wearing, and send that through the mail somehow, or drop it off somewhere and have people go and get it. Without looking at the letter, it's very tough for me. When as a forensic linguist, I want every single communication involved in a case. And if I'm missing one, it could throw off the whole timeline and chronology and things like that, levels of escalation. So apparently what we finally had confirmed, I think by Friday, was that the three communications received early in the week were all the same. They were apparently identical. So that says one author of those. We're going to discount the guy in California who wrote something, and they traced back his IP, and he was arrested within 24 hours. So he's out of our conversation.
Jim, let me ask you this: when a ransom note is sent to the media rather than to a family member, it suggests one of three things to me. Number one, it's a hoax. Number two, it's someone seeking attention. Or number three, someone's trying to create panic. I mean, that's really, I'm not saying that it rules out the authenticity of the document itself, but it certainly raises questions.
Absolutely.
Think about the Ramsey case. That note was left in the home.
Yes. And there's a whole separate story to that case we're not going to get into, but at least the note was in the home. The Lindbergh kidnapping, 1932, in outside of Trenton, New Jersey, the initial note was left there. Then another half dozen came in. I think this is a good time. There's an investigator that I know. He wants to remain anonymous here, but I talked to him about one of the last known kidnappings for profit in the U.S., and that was the case of Sidney Riso, who was an Exxon executive. This was 1992. He was 58 years old, and I'm just going to my colleague put down some bullet points, and I'll just read them off here, and you can compare them to what we have today. Now, this was the Riso case. I hate to use the word legitimate, but it was an actual abduction of a man for specific purposes of getting money from his family, Exxon, whatever you want. So legitimate or not, you can use different terms. But by legal definition, it was a for-profit kidnapping attempt. So just a few bullet points here from my friend who worked the case right in the middle of it. The ransom demands and communications in the Riso case between the kidnappers and the Riso family involved letters hand-placed, mailed, newspaper ads, and telephone calls. So interestingly, nothing to the media in that case. Now, it doesn't automatically discount what we're going through with Guthrie. Next point, there were a lot of miscommunications between the kidnappers and Exxon. We don't know that at this point, if that's happening or not. On day one, we received the initial ransom demand letter. Now, that took a few days in this case. But again, back to the Riso case, day one, ransom demand letter received, and Sidney Riso's Exxon credit card. That's a pretty good proof of life, or certainly proof that you have your victim in custody. Doesn't mean he's alive, but it means you have him in custody. We don't even have that in this case as far as we know. The letter stated that the kidnappers have him and demanded an $18.5 million ransom. We don't know what the number is in this case with Mrs. Guthrie. The letter also stated that they would prove he is alive before the ransom would be paid. So I'll give these two kidnappers back then, it turned out to be two, of Mr. Riso, some kudos for knowing that they're going to have to show some proof of life. Anyway, as we found out after the arrest of the subjects, Sidney Riso died on day 4. Let's hope that's not the case here. For the next 54 days, they tried to make it look like he was alive by referring to him in the third person, by saying in the letters that he misses his family and wants to come home, etc. Interestingly, that's what we're hearing in bits and pieces from TMZ and others. They also demanded Mrs. Riso go on national TV on Mother's Day of that year, stating that they have received the latest demands and want him back on Father's Day. And that kind of sums up that part of what he went through. Eventually, a bunch of phone calls were made, and agents found someone making a call from a phone, payphone back then, and followed the people to a rental car agency, and a husband and wife team were arrested. The wife got about 20 years. I think she just got out in the last few years of prison. But the husband, if he's still alive, which I think he is, he'll never go anywhere. Because again, they hid the body of Mr. Riso in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, and the wife eventually took them to where the body was buried. So there is one kidnapping, one of the last for-profit kidnappings. There was one in New York City I referred to a year later of a tuxedo CEO of a company. He was kidnapped, kept in a hole for about 13 days. And Ray, in that case, the bad guys would come along and lower down a mini tape recorder and some kind of a dedicated cell phone, even back then. Sure, it was like a big brick phone or something. And he was allowed to talk on tape. And I think they would play these recordings to the family with date and time, saying, yeah, I'm okay, get me out of here, pay the money. And they were legitimate recordings from, his name is Harvey Weinstein, believe it or not. Nothing to do with the pervert in prison now from Hollywood. So 2 cases. One friend I asked to give us kind of an update on, and I read those bullet points. Those being handled very differently, as far as we know, than this kidnapping. So I did say on the air last night with Laura Ingram, I'm hoping that a forensic linguist, the TMZ people, it's great. They're looking at these letters, they're rendering opinions. Oh, he's well written. His English teacher would like him, and you can tell he's educated. Okay, that's nice. He's saying that stuff. He's not a forensic linguist. He hasn't looked at thousands of these things. Knowing that people they wear masks when they pull robberies. People can disguise their writing style. I'm not talking about penmanship. We know this is most likely computer generated in an email, but they can still put in some elements of disguise, but the trained forensic linguist will know what to look for and perhaps determine age, race, gender, even a part of the country from which they may have grown up. Ray, you and I say Wooder, and we're going to go tap Mac. Wooder wouldn't come apart in a ransom communication, but there are other geographic references that we all speak in different parts of the country that could possibly be a clue. So it's not me, the former FBI's forensic linguist, looking at these, but I hope someone is and doing their best. May not solve it overnight, but they can help minimize the suspect pool.
Jim, that's exactly why law enforcement, the FBI, and originally the sheriff's department was kind of cautious about this ransom message, because the basics in this, they know you have to have proof of life evidence. That's basic, and it needs to be details of the victim that are not known by anybody else. And you mentioned that piece of clothing, a lock of hair, something that lets people know that you have. And you have to have some sort of communication channel that can be validated, whatever that is. Whether it's a boost phone, whether it's messages that are being dropped off in different places and they're picking them up. There's got to be something that's validated. And you make a great point with linguistics, but there's also not just linguistics, but there are also behavior analysis as well.
Sure.
But the linguistics is so important, because you're right, not just the age, but the region that they're from, the part of this country that they're from. I don't even think people understand that, Jim. And I know this isn't a forensic linguistics class, but you can, by the way people write, we can tell whether it's a male or female. We can tell their approximate age. You can tell what part of the country they're from, and you can
Native
tell whether
native
it's
English
staged.
speakers or not native English speakers?
Correct. So I mean, it's good. But here's the thing: when you look at how the note is delivered, again, we go out and we say, "Hey, it came to the media," and then I get the other thing is the deadline, the two deadlines.
Too
I've
unusual.
never, in all my years and all my training, I've never ever seen that. Now that doesn't mean I'm saying that's bull, but here, when I'm looking at these guys initially, I'm saying they seem kind of organized, right? I'm thinking they are kind of organized. The way they did this, the way they extracted her, it seems to be
Well,
done
be
very
careful, Ray.
well.
It may not be the kidnappers who extracted her,
You're right. You're right. You're right.
or the people alleging a kidnapping, ransom communication. And I know we
But it
talked
seems a little
before.
bit more organized, Jim. It does. At least in how it was done. That's kind of done here under secrecy.
Well, what I'll agree with, because apparently there's already a cyber currency site. And I don't know too much about that stuff. I learned a little bit in the last few days, but there's a like a 30-digit number that's been traced back to a legitimate Bitcoin depository account or whatever they're even called, and that apparently has been confirmed. So of course that's, we don't know that personally, but that's been confirmed. So I'll agree with you, professional and organized in terms of getting money as a result of the abduction of Mrs. Guthrie. I would still, without that proof of life, though, I would, by the same people who are sending these communications, these may just be opportunists, Ray, from conceivably another part of the world. They're scammers already, and that's where their organizational skills come in. There could be a prince out of
Yeah, you're right,
Nigeria,
Jim. You're
someone
right.
in Eastern Europe on one of
You're right.
the, what they used to call them, internet farms or something, and they're doing all kind. And all of a sudden, whoa, what am I reading here? A rich woman's mother kidnapped. She makes 20 million a year, meaning the daughter of Savannah Guthrie.
Mhm.
We got a payday here if we want to jump on this. So all I'm saying here
I
is
agree. I
I
agree.
want the investigators to pursue this as a for-profit kidnapping, but also which maybe strangers come in from out of the area, they scoop her up. Why the strangers? Why these professional kidnappers would spend 41 minutes in a house? That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me as we started off our program. Or is someone just taking advantage? And whoever abducted her, he, conceivably she or they, got to say, man, I'm the luckiest person around. The FBI is chasing this lady. I never did this for money. I just hate her because, or her family members because, or her daughter because she said this on TV or didn't say that. So, um, and if people are disappointed listening to us saying we want, oh, you two profiler guys and seasoned investigators, we want the exact answer what happened. We can't do that. We're on the outside. We will give you scenarios, and I'm pretty darn sure when it's over. In the Brown case, we were pretty darn close too. We didn't
Right.
say Portugal or a 25-year grudge, but we certainly said this guy had some kind of a grievance
Right.
against Brown University, one or more of the people shot, certainly the MIT professor, and we were correct about that. And that case broke just as we were about to do our special podcast. Let's see if this case breaks today. So but if we can stick on language for a minute, and this hasn't been covered too much in the media, but I went over it on Megyn Kelly's show yesterday, and I wish I could claim I was the one that came up with this, but because I listened to the Guthrie family, there's two different pleas to
Hmm.
whomever is holding Mrs. Guthrie. It was the two sisters and the brother, the first one. The brother hardly said a thing. And then I think the next night or so, the brother came out with his own separate statement. What I didn't realize, and I thought, I have no doubt the behavioralists at the FBI helped them craft what was being
Absolutely.
said. It was their words, but they said, hey, maybe leave this out,
Right.
soften
Right.
this, but proof for life, we need all this stuff. And I don't have the quote. I meant to write it down before we came here, but people can easily look it up. There's clips out there. The family says in so many words. I think it was Savannah looking into the camera, kind of glancing down at her notes. Um, our mother is a kind and gentle person. Talk to her. You'll see. I heard that. It didn't ring any bells. I said, all right, well, that's probably true. Don't you know it? And Ram, I'm sure you're aware of this, but there's a
Mhm.
clip from The Silence of the Lambs in which the senator's daughter, it's a fictional case, of course, the movie, the senator's daughter is kidnapped, and the senator goes on TV pleading to Buffalo Bill is the one who did it, and she's being kept in a hole in the ground, and
Yeah, I
and
remember.
the senator mother says virtually those exact words. Um, my daughter is, kind and gentle person. Talk to her. You'll see. So the internet kind of went, semi crazy with that yesterday. And let me just real quick throw in here, I can't help but relate to the cases I've worked over the years and similarities, non similarities. And it's similar in one way, dissimilar in another. Anyone who's taken my grad courses or read my books, the ransom letter, we referred to that earlier, which never was a ransom letter because she was never kidnapped, John Bonet. But in that ransom letter, there are references to three separate movies. So here you have in 1997, actually it was it late 96, I believe, we have this ransom note for John Benet Ramsey saying, with a quote from The Usual Suspects, is what's set up the top, this foreign faction. Next on page 2, a quote from the movie Dirty Harry. It's an extended quote. And on the third page, it's a direct quote from the movie Speed. So you ask yourself, what kidnappers, foreign faction as they call themselves, have to make movie quotes to legitimize their communication? So now this is different with the Guthrie case. This is the family. I'm not accusing them of anything here, but we were discussing, Megan and I and the other people on the panel yesterday, Megan Kelly, we were discussing, is it subconscious, words purposely chosen? Had they seen the movie? Were they aware of this? And to me, it doesn't mean the family's involved in this per se. It is just an unusual choice of words for the family to put out when their mother is kidnapped. And here in The Silence of the Lamb, it's the mother who put it out for her daughter having been kidnapped, a fictionalized case. So very interesting there. And what that means, I really don't know. Maybe someday when Savannah finally talks, this is all over, hopefully with her mother back safe, she can say, well, we chose those words because, and tell us. So,
Well, I could tell you from my perspective, from a negotiation perspective,
sure.
that what their primary goal was to initiate communication with the captors.
And let me just add, and to humanize the mother.
Exactly.
Yes.
So she gave them a choice that, hey, we're willing to negotiate, but we need proof of life.
Yes.
And then the thing she said, that statement she made, Jim, is exactly that, to humanize
Yes.
Nancy, that she's not a vehicle, she's not an object, she's a person. And they wanted to maintain public awareness without escalating anything. So I know there's not a doubt in my mind that both profilers and negotiators reviewed everything that was done. And when you look at the tone, and I always tell students when I we talk about de-escalation training, I always tell them that your tone is 5 times more important than what you say. And here in this situation, it was non-accusatory, it was non-threatening, it was calm, but it was urgent, and it was personal, but it wasn't chaotic. It was real. It felt real, which I thought was very, very good.
It did, and I take nothing away from what you just said. You've done as much work in this field as, and certainly negotiations as I have, but if not more. But I just found it interesting, that quote from a movie about a serial killer and a kidnapper.
Yeah, I
And
hear you.
and just,
I hear you.
I'd be very curious down the line. And a lot of younger people I didn't have it memorized. Some people have all these lines from movies memorized. I'm not one of these guys. Some, of course, we all do. But this is one that got by me. I think if I was actually assigned this case, in fact, I know it, I would. But again, this is the family we're talking about. This is not the
Mhm.
letters, the communications from the real or opportunist kidnappers. That's something different in terms of what they would write. It's more important to learn about them through that kind of language usage. necessarily than the family. I also found it interesting that the brother on both videos, 2 days in a row, wore a hat, a baseball style hat. And for the first day, I just couldn't blow it up or in biggin, I think Homer Simpson used to say, the picture on the screen. But it actually comes back to the hat. The logo on the hat is a state park very close to Tucson, Segard or something like that. Sogard. I have it written down somewhere. So, is it possible? Saguaro, Saguaro National Park. He had that yellow, I think it was yellow, with the logo in front. Is he? And I'm not questioning him at all. He's apparently former military, fighter pilot, but maybe he wears a baseball cap every single day. We know guys like that. He just so happened to wear this one here. Could it have been some kind of a clue to the people writing these communications of some location of something happening? I don't know. But coincidence or not, that's the hat he wore. Another question we'd like to ask. And did the profilers and behavioralists and negotiators who were walking them through some of the stuff beforehand, did they say, yes, wear the hat, don't wear the hat, wear an Arizona Cardinals hat? I mean, what kind of hat do you wear when you're giving a plea for your mother to be released? I don't know. So we'll find out later if that hat has any significance to what the family is trying to state to whoever is holding this woman, if in fact someone is holding her at this point in time.
They mentioned the seizure of the Subaru that was owned by Nancy out of her garage. And a lot of people question, why take that car now? I mean, look, you're doing interviews of people that are close around her. You're going to process that vehicle, because if someone mentions that vehicle or says something about that vehicle and they don't show up as being in that vehicle, either by DNA, touch DNA, or prints, I think that's um, a really good point with that in looking at that. But the other thing too is a lot of people says, what do you think law enforcement's doing right now? And I think that they're wondering and they're looking at this timeline and the movements, and they're looking at witnesses and activity in the area that can still be clarified that they haven't clarified yet. I mean, when I was on Jesse Waters last night, he asked me, he says, well, what is it that the FBI is doing that the sheriffs hadn't done? And I said, look, in from what I understand, from what I know, and what I've done, is if Jim, you were to make an arrest and then turn the prisoner over to me, the first thing I'm going to do with that prisoner is search him.
Oh, absolutely.
And you could say, I already searched him. Jim, I know nothing wrong with that, but I'm going to search him too, because it starts from that point moving forward, that if something happens, I'm going to be the one who has to answer to it, not you. The same thing here when they're searching that residence, and they keep going back, which we've done that hundreds of times in search warrants, where we've gone back again and again. I would expect them to continue to canvass, follow up on tips that are coming in. I mean, look, someone talked about a van on the street. Someone talked about a Circle K gas station. They had some information. I don't know if it's video. And people have to understand, we go on these shows and we talk on here. We don't have all the answers. We're not boots on the ground. But the guys that are boots on the ground, hey, they're trying to locate physical evidence. They're trying to locate surveillance that may have been missed early on. At this stage of the game, their investigation, like I said last night, could be shifting from a broad searching to more targeted efforts. They're reassessing prior leads. Just because you cover something once doesn't mean you're not going to go back and recover it again. And that means re-interviewing people, key individuals. You want to tighten this down so that you can rule things out and begin to focus on what really matters.
Yeah, I was on with Megan the other day, and I guess that's when the story first broke with Ashley Banfield having a high-ranking source. She wouldn't name from what agency, but she's known the person for 10 years, and the person is very reliable. I've never been a source for the media. I know you haven't, Ray.
Mhm.
I don't like them, but I understand where the media come from. But they had a long discussion about the brother-in-law, I guess Savannah's brother-in-law, or Mrs. Guthrie's son-in-law, and why his car was towed in and impounded. And at maybe the third, I think this was like Wednesday, and they went on, and it was finally my turn to talk. And I'm always respectful. I mean, Megan's very bright, a lawyer. But I said, I understand what you're saying, but I don't see any real big flags being raised here. He may have been one of the last people to see Mrs. Guthrie. It may have been in that car. I'm still not 100% clear about that. So it's very logical to bring that car in and search, and just look for anything in there you could find, even something that came off of her that they can then compare somewhere else down the line if they find other evidence of it. I said it by no means necessarily implicates that side of the family. I think Annie is the sister, her husband's Tommaso. But I also said, and I said, Megan, you're a lawyer. This could go to trial in a year and a half, and I can see some poor investigator on the stand, when someone else has been arrested, someone we don't even know about yet. Well, you mean you didn't bother searching the car of the closest family members because Agent so and so, that most homicides, 85% are committed by people now. Yeah, so you didn't even bother. So you don't know there's any evidence in that car. So this way, this is off the table. Car search,
Correct.
and it's done. And it's just ruled out. At least the car. I'm not ruling anyone out at this point. I don't
Right.
know. We're not inside, but I'm just saying they really had no choice. And the mother's fingerprints, her DNA, certainly touch DNA, can be
Mhm.
in that car, and it would mean nothing because she was in that car all the time. Now, if it's in the trunk and there's blood, that's a different story, and it's of course the mother's blood. So that would change all that around. So
Yeah, but
uh,
people say, well, that person's already been interviewed. Well, guess what? I'm going to go back and interview him because you're not going to ask the same questions that I ask. I may ask something that may generate something. Look, here's my point: is that initially, I'm sure they did a neighborhood canvas and they interviewed everybody on that street, and nobody mentioned a white van. Come
yeah,
Thursday, Friday, they said, "Oh, yeah, there was a white van that was parked on the street. We don't know who it was." But it just goes to show you that you continue to go back and go back and go back because things continue to arise. And it's really, it's not about being sloppy that we miss things or that law enforcement miss things. It's being thorough. It's being thorough. I just think it's what we've always done, Jim, when we worked on the job, even in law enforcement. I would never say, "Hey, look, could I miss something?" If I'm searching a room, we'd always, when we would search an area, I would search a place and we'd send another guy behind
of
me
course.
and search it again, just to make sure we're not
I would
missing
expect
anything.
nothing less of a search
Absolutely.
if I was running it. Second
I'm not
opinion.
I'm
Doctors do
not
it all the
offended
time.
by it. I'm not offended. That guy found something that I missed. I'm saying, how the heck did I miss that? But the thing is that don't be afraid to do those things. It's not personal. I know we're getting kind of wrapping up here, Jim. My prayers go out to the Guthrie family. I pray that she's safe, and I pray that she's home very very soon. And I know the president mentioned definitive answers that are coming. Um, and people say, well, he says that. What do you think? And I says, well, I don't know what he knows. So it's kind of hard to comment to that, but I hope he's right.
Well, I hope that if they're definitive answers, it's of a good nature concerning Mrs. Guthrie. I don't care about the money that goes out, whatever. I actually suggested with Megan Kelly yesterday, on her show. I'm not just throwing her name out, but just I put this publicly as my point, not just talking to a buddy in a bar. I said maybe the family could consider putting $1 million reward out for information regarding the location of Nancy Guthrie. And if that in fact turns to proof of life, from the abductors slash kidnappers, then they can raise that amount to what is what they're asking. Interesting, in 1992, those kidnappers were asking $18.5 million for an Exxon executive. With inflation, Ray, I haven't heard any dollar amounts in all the press
That's 30,
releases.
it's millions. I don't
Well,
know what it is. It's
it would
millions.
be
And they talk about Bitcoin, and I think the big thing about Bitcoin is the traceability of it
sure.
and the ability not to trace it. So that's what it's not in dollars and cents, but it's still liquid. You still spend it.
Yeah. So I made a chart for myself. Looking downward, this is definitely an abduction. Then two lines go out underneath. Is it for revenge? Is it for profit? If it's revenge, real or perceived, did somebody actually do something? And doesn't just mean the mother. It could be one of the mother's kids or extended family members. She didn't pay a bill. Savannah said something on the air, some obsessed fan, something like that. Um, but the abduction itself, let's just look at the narrow window there. That was successful.
Yes.
On the other side of the line, for-profit kidnapping, it's unclear if it's been successful yet, based on what we know. And I would argue that at least in the U.S., if this is a for-profit kidnapping, these people may not have done this before because they would have left some note at the door or in the house. They would have given a proof of life early on. The longer they're holding on to Mrs. Guthrie, the more the risk. It's already high risk as it is. It's higher risk on daily extra doses of steroids every day they hold on to her. And God forbid, like with Mr. Riso, something bad can happen while in custody. Then everything is for nil, for naught, and no one gets anything. So they really need to prove that life. Now, the other mitigating circumstances are, so there's the two categories, mitigating circumstances. It's this opportunist we're talking about. Could be a local yokel like the guy in California, but a little bit more sophisticated, or it could be, people from different continents. We'll just leave it at that. It could just be some AH, and I'll be polite here, just wanting to harass the family. Hey, I can have some fun with this, and they put this thing out, make it look good. Although the fact that there's a legitimate Bitcoin account, that seems to take away from that. And the last option I had in here was it's a misdirection by the person who did the abduction for revenge. But I think for them to have, it would be kind of risky for them to do that. But again, if this is only, I'm pissed off at Mrs. Guthrie for what she did, what one of her kids did, what one of her grandkids did, I'll show them. And then all of a sudden, these people come out of the woodwork asking for money. It's like, oh my God, I couldn't have asked for a better scenario than this. So if they only wanted to kill her and they were strangers, they would probably just leave her in the house. But if they knew the woman, would they then decide to take her away? It just, being on, the outside, and you kind of said it with Jesse last night in so many words, the investigators working the case are putting puzzle pieces together. And I think I said something like this with Laura before you, and we just have the morsels of those puzzle pieces
Correct.
that we're trying to put together. But I'll leave it with this, Ray, and I know we are going to close out here. And that's why I wanted to read the email bullet points that my friend sent me, who had worked the Sidney Riso case, for-profit kidnapping in 1992. There may be no active law enforcement officer right now in the entire U.S., and I'd be glad to be corrected on this, who's ever worked a for-profit kidnapping. And it doesn't mean you can't work these things and bring other skills from missing children, missing adults, extortions, even, mass shootings or serial killings, with camera, surveillance cameras and tag recognition software, facial, all those will come into play. But these are so rare in the U.S. I mean, the Lindbergh kidnapping essentially didn't work. The baby died that night during the kidnapping, and it took about 2 years to identify Bruno Hauptmann. They just don't work in this country. They work in other countries, Mexico, Central America, South America, parts of Europe, but not here, and that's why they just don't happen. We're not talking custody kidnappings or Elizabeth Smart type kidnappings, all serious, and can be very bad. But this is strictly like a business endeavor. They are just so rare in this family, with families like this in this country. And quite frankly, I don't think they've done a very good job. I just hope they've done a good job in keeping her alive because that's their only chance of getting money.
I agree, Jim. I agree.
Okay, it's now about 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon Eastern time. I haven't heard of any breaks in the case. The only break I care about is she's walking down a highway or someone dropped her off at a hospital room and Mrs. Guthrie's doing okay. So we can come back and discuss this, Ray, at some point. There will be a conclusion to it. I hope and pray, and a positive one, meaning she's recovered and alive. I don't care about the money part. If they had to spend money, whatever. But we'll see if the abductor is also the kidnapper. I have questions about that. And the very last thing I'll say, but the investigators still have to play both sides of that coin or multiple sides, and some have to go with those concentric circles. Others have to go with the kidnapping and work both sides of this case equally. Final words, and I'll take us out.
I'm good, Jim. This isn't typical. Here's somebody just popped up here. Said life or death situation. The sheriff should have brought spotlights to search the area. He's exactly right. You should have did that evening. Well, they didn't know that evening. They didn't know till around noon the next day when they got there. But they should have stayed and did what they needed to do. I totally agree. You can never do enough.
There's also a Night Stalker type plane that they could have had out.
Are you seeing these, Jim?
I am seeing them, yeah.
Says, we discussed this already. If it was an intentional abduction, a ransom letter would have been left. I agree with that. Been left on a better fridge. Can she open a garage door and close it in 2 minutes if she used a cane? So that's another good question. Question.
Let's take some of these questions in, and maybe in the next few nights we can come back and answer them. We'll take them in on our website. Everybody, thanks for listening to this special edition of Cold Red, one of the biggest cases of certainly this year so far, and I have a feeling for the rest of this year. But thanks for listening to Cold Red. Please like and subscribe to us. Check us out on coldredpodcast.com. Share and like and subscribe, all those things. Coldredpodcast.com. And thanks to Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, our producers, Rick Schilling, our music coordinator, and everyone. We will see you next time on Cold Red. Prayers for you, Mrs. Guthrie and the Guthrie family.